So for today's part 2 of the review and criticism that I'm doing on the Foundation series, I wanted to talk about the just like a recap of the original trilogy. As I said in part 1, it started off as a trilogy. Asimov wrote the Foundation series and then just sort of left it alone while he focused on the robots and the Empire. And mid-60s came around. It was actually won an award for the best series, which was pretty cool. And still not a lot happened with it. They did some new additions every once in a while, but the real focus was because it was Asimov. He did a lot of non-fiction work. He was doing a lot of editing, and he was doing a lot for his Robots series. That's what he really had become known for. In the early 80s, he decided to return to the Foundation. And so he wrote 4 other books, 2 prequels, 2 sequels. And that's why I'm going to focus only on the original trilogy today, and then we'll focus on those next. And then we'll have a part 4 where we get into the analysis of the story as a whole. So, to give you a recap, the Foundation starts, the first book, which is called Foundation. First book starts with Harry Seldon. He's a mathematician and a sociologist. And he's developed a new type of sociological math, which he calls psychohistory. And the idea is, the larger a group of people you have, right? Bigger the sample size, the more accurately over a given time you can predict their behavior. And so, when he starts doing his psychohistory calculations, he discovers that the galactic empire that rules over everything is going to fall any day now. And when it does, because it controls so much of the galaxy and technology, trade, and all of that, when the Empire falls, there's going to be a galactic dark age, barbaric times that last for 30,000 years. Now, just for doing this calculation, he is actually accused of treason by the Empire for suggesting that the Empire could ever fall. So he gets taken into trial, and there he pleads his case, which is basically like, hey, I'm not saying the Empire deserves to fall, I'm just saying that this is what my mathematical calculations have shown. And so he proposes an idea to him. He says, hey, how about, just in case I'm right, I gather the best artistic and scientific minds. We go off far away. You never have to worry about us again. And we will create the most comprehensive encyclopedia in the galaxy. That way, if anything happens to the Empire, we've got a repository of information. And if nothing happens to the Empire, you guys never have to see us again. Right? The Empire agrees, mostly. They say you can go to a place called Terminus. It's at the end of the galaxy, way the hell over at the edge where they have very little control anyway, and little presence, right? And so that becomes the Foundation, the Harry Seldon Foundation. And they're there to make the Galactic Encyclopedia. Well, Harry Seldon dies because he's an old-ass man. And after Harry Seldon dies, about 50 years later, the planet of Terminus is faced with a problem. They've got 4 other planets breathing down their neck, right? Because they have no imperial defense, They're not under Imperial control, but they're not under Imperial protection either. These planets think they can walk all over Terminus, right? And then something amazing happens. There's a vault on Terminus, right? This is the Harry Seldon vault, which cannot be opened, right? But opens automatically. And it does. It opens up automatically. And there's a holographic recording of Harry Seldon in there. And he says, hey guys, by my calculations, you guys should be facing a Harry Seldon crisis. So a Seldon crisis is anything that his math predicted that could come up and needs to be resolved, right? The resolution of it is what will keep the Foundation going. So he explains to them, the Foundation wasn't really set up to write an encyclopedia. There was another motive. The Foundation was set up to make that 30,000 years of Dark Ages a much more manageable 1,000 years of Dark Ages. And he said that the way they did that is he's left instructions for the Seldon crisis, right? To let them know that they are on the right path. And he also tells them that there is a second foundation that he did as like a contingency plan. He founded two foundations, one at each end of the galaxy, right? So then we've got the young man in charge of the Seldon crisis. He has the idea to play the planets off one another so that they are not strong enough to do anything to Terminus, right? Meanwhile, Terminus, because it's full of scientists and artists and everybody, it may not have the best technology in the galaxy, but for a single planet that's making all their own stuff, they actually have pretty good technology for the region, right? So they can defend themselves enough while these four planets, they battle it out against each other and wipe each other out. That ends up being the correct resolution to the Seldon crisis, right? And that guy gets voted in as mayor of the planet. And it's a pretty decent end to the story. Then we go to the next book in the trilogy, Foundation and Empire. Foundation and Empire is really two separate stories. Like I mentioned in the last video, more like two short stories put into the same book. So the first one is a Seldon crisis comes up. That Seldon crisis is that the Imperial Navy is sending ships to harass the Foundation, right? Now, the Foundation has been sort of growing like its own little mini empire, right? It's based on democracy and scientific advancement, but they're still conquering planets, taking them into their Foundation government. Empire doesn't like that. The Empire is losing power day by day because they're about to fall. So they see things like that as a threat. And they send the Navy. Well, it's later revealed that, and the Navy backs off. They go back, the Emperor has them recalled, and then the Empire falls right after that. And Seldon reveals in his Seldon Crisis hologram that this is the point where the Empire just has like no legs to stand on. The Empire has stretched itself so thin that if they had tried to fight the Foundation, even though they have more military power, fighting the Foundation would have gained them nothing and would have been costly to them because they're stretched so thin. The Foundation isn't equal to them, but is equal enough that they could have put up a fight that made it costly. Meanwhile, if they don't fight, which they didn't, then they're seen as weak, and they have a lot more trouble holding on to the systems that already want to leave the empire. So he correctly predicted that. Then there's the storyline of the mule, which is maybe there's not really, like, this isn't a huge famous pop culture story, but this might be like the closest part. This is the part I've heard people mention even if they haven't read the books. So at least within my limited experience, this is the part people are most familiar with. The story of the mule. So out on the outer reaches of former galactic territory, right? When the Empire fell, this warlord started taking over planets, right? And he's fast approaching the Foundation's territory. They don't know what to do. They're expecting Harry Seldon to pop up with a Seldon crisis anytime, and he's not doing it, right? They have no crisis hologram to talk about this guy. Well, it turns out the warlord, he's known as the mule because he cannot produce viable offspring. Turns out the mule is a mutant. And the thing about mutants is that the Seldon plan can't account for anomalies like that, right? Because the whole idea of the Seldon plan, psychohistory in general, is that people have to act in a natural way. So something unnatural like a mutant throws a wrench into all of that, okay? So the Foundation gets a team together. Their job is to find the second Foundation, in the hopes that the second Foundation might have some kind of answers, right? Because Harry Seldon was very vague when he told them about the second Foundation. All they really know is that he founded it and it exists, and it's at the other end of the galaxy, okay? So a few people joined the party, most notably the mule's old court jester, a magician and fool named Magnifico, okay? And they go searching. And as they're searching for the second Foundation, they're having trouble finding it. It gets revealed that Magnifico actually is the mule. He also heard about the second Foundation. He doesn't want any threats to his power, so he's decided to use the Foundation to track those guys down, kill them, and subjugate whatever territory they have, right? Mule's not a nice dude at all. And then it's further found out that the way he's able to be such a good conqueror, warlord, and the reason that Harry Seldon and his plan can't account for a guy like him is because his main power is directing people's emotions, right? So like he can make people feel a certain way. If he rolls up on a planet with his army, he can make the native population feel defeated just by showing up, just by willing it so, right? He can make his own army feel much more confident. And it's only a minor detail at this point. We will talk about it more in the criticism and portion of this, but it's noted quite a few times that he is ugly as hell. The mule is not an attractive dude. He's like a walking bird with no feathers. I think there's a significance to that, but we'll talk about that in a couple days. So, the story from there moves really fast. The issue is not resolved at the end of Foundation and Empire. It continues on to the last book in the trilogy, Second Foundation. They believe they found the second Foundation. And we find out the whole deal of the second Foundation is to continue the work of psychohistory, right? To develop it as a science even further, to make more accurate predictions, but also slightly more insidious, their job is to make sure that the first foundation is actually on the right track. And this makes sense, because when you think about science and things like sociology, predictions, things like that, like no matter how good it is, the whole thing about accounting for human nature and large groups, and think about like shooting things off at an angle and how much they diverge as distance goes on. So it's a good idea to have something like the second foundation to make sure they're adhering closely enough to the plan, because one small deviation that doesn't get caught can affect things, 10 or 20 or 100 or 1,000 years later, right? And they have a very specific plan. So the second foundation, they do that, but also they've been developing their mental skills, like psychic stuff, right? Subtly manipulating minds. So the second foundation comes out of hiding. Turns out they've been in hiding this whole time. They've been hidden purposely, right? They weren't meant to be found. And they show up just long enough so that they can take care of the mule. And they basically use their powers to like wipe the desire for conquest out of his head. So the mule isn't interested in conquering planets. He's got the planets he's already conquered. He retires to them and lives a happy life until he dies. And with that, the second foundation has sort of gotten things back on track. Except they haven't. Because here's the big problem. Once the first foundation knows about the second foundation and knows what their goals are and what their methods are, right? Like, it was one thing to just know they existed. But once you know what they're there for and what they do and how they accomplish things, it's sort of like in a, if you watch The Good Place, there's a recent episode where the characters were told that their motivations are thrown into question once they understand how the afterlife works, right? And if your motivations are thrown into question, you can't get points for being good. Well, it's a similar kind of thing with the foundation. Now that they know they're being scrutinized about everything, and now that they know that some events are being guided, their ability to adhere to the plan is shot. Because psychohistory depends on people acting naturally in a group setting. And anything that might cause them to act unnaturally, for example, anticipating that their actions might be directed by a secret organization, and so you go against what you would normally do. That's something that is in human nature. It screws up the whole plan. So they hunt down the second foundation. They don't like being controlled from the shadows. And they find on Terminus the second foundation. It's made up of like 50 people, right? And they fucking slaughter them. They're gone. Dead. And they think about, makes sense. He said at two ends of the galaxy, right? And the galaxy, it's a disk, right? And that's the way circles work. One end, all the way around. The other end is right at the same spot. And so they're going to live happily ever after. And they're in control of their own lives and destiny now. Except they're not. Because the second foundation isn't actually on Terminus. The second foundation got 50 volunteers to go to Terminus and pretend to be the whole organization so that the first foundation would think they were dead, so the first foundation would get back to the psychohistory plan, and they could get to work as the second foundation of fixing the mule's fuck up of the plan, right? Is genius. They're actually located on Trantor. Trantor, the city planet, right? Used to be the jewel of the Empire. Is mostly abandoned now. People have ripped up the metal and started farming on it. Everyone there is dumb as fuck. except for the second foundation, who lives in the bowels of the place, secretly, directing the events like a bunch of Morlocks and hoods. And so that was their big plan, was to make the first foundation think they were gone, so that the first foundation would get back to the plan, which they now have to rewrite. And that's the end of the Foundation trilogy. It's pretty brilliant, and it's well written, like all of Asimov's work, really. It's an enjoyable read, super influential on science fiction, and we're going to get into the hows and the whys of that influence in a couple of days. Coming up on next Monday's update, I'll warn you ahead of time, next week's updates are going to be on the right days, but they will be a little erratic because I have to go on an in-law vacation to Florida, and oh boy, so they will be coming at the right days, but it's going to depend on my internet access and free time as far as what time during the day those get posted, okay? But on Monday, we're going to talk about the prequels and sequels to Foundation, expanding the story beyond his original intent, and then on that Wednesday update, we're going to talk about the actual criticism and analysis of why the Foundation series is important and how it's important, how it's influenced science fiction, and continues to this day to influence science fiction. I want to thank you guys for coming and watching my video. This is a longer one than I normally post, and you guys sat here and listened to me yap about one of my favorite book series while I'm doing the dishes. I really appreciate that. Coming up on Friday, we got a more fiction update. That's as always on the Patreon page. If you go ahead and go over to the Patreon page, there are a number of exclusives there, including access to work that will probably never be published. Anything that gets published, you get for free. That's an awesome thing, especially since toward the end of the month here, I've got the Henchman Interviews book coming up. That's in editing right now, so I'm hoping to have that out of editing by the end of the month so it can get published. That would be fantastic. I'm also working on some other big things, and I don't want to announce them prematurely in case I either flake or they don't work out for other reasons, because that's always a disappointment. As far as other things, hit the like, share, and subscribe. A few of you have been sharing my videos out. I really appreciate that when you do that. Really increases my reach, and as I've always said, the more people that see this stuff, the more I get out of it, which means the more I'm able to put into it. And that's really, really important. My first goal, if I can make enough money, is to get a decent recording setup so that I can give you guys better quality videos instead of recording on a phone in my kitchen. It would be much better if I had like something with a decent camera, maybe a microphone so you can hear me better. Those would be my my next goals as far as the finances of Touchbone goes. So like, share, subscribe, hit that bell notification if you want to keep getting emails about when I'm doing my videos. Every once in a while I stream on Twitch. It's kind of boring, but some people like it, so go ahead and check that out. Coopacabra 2676 if you ever want to do that. I'm on Twitter at Merman Murdoch. I am on a lot of platforms, and a lot of it's just me being ridiculous. So anyway, also go ahead and check out KC McMonster on Twitch and Patreon. She does a live stream almost every day of her charcoal art, and she is amazing and for hire. So go ahead and send her some money and get some of her art, because it's goddamn fantastic. Also, my homie Andy is running the Hodag RPG, and he's posting a lot of fantasy art there. Go ahead and check that out. You can find it on Facebook. Really impressed with that stuff. And as far as everything else goes, have a good week, guys. I've taken up a lot of time, and so I don't want to take up any further time. I'm going to go eat some lunch and get to work. Have a great one. Bye.